Hi, everybody. This is Derrick Ruiz, your apartment broker and expert and author of Cloud Agent. I am so thrilled today to have Steve Wayne from ProspectNow.com as my interview guest. Steve Wayne is the CEO of Prospect Now, and he also started the company. It's the top provider of prospecting data for the commercial and residential real estate industry, tracking over 10 million buildings, 8 million owners, and 30 million tenants. Prospect Now has sold thousands of subscriptions from individual real estate professionals to Fortune 500 companies. Steve is also the founder of NoteMarketplace.com, a note trading website with thousands of monthly visitors and members. Prior to launching Prospect Now, Steve successfully brokered the sale of millions of dollars in retail shopping centers at markets in Millichap, so he knows his stuff. Steve holds a Bachelor of Science in Mechanical Engineering from the University of Arizona and resides in Los Altos, California. And I know that, Steve, that mechanical engineering degree really came in handy with your real estate career, right?
It's one of those things where an 18-year-old kid decided what I was going to do for the rest of my life, right? And it turned out that that wasn't the case.
Exactly. So you're up in Los Altos. I guess you're neighbors with Mark Zuckerberg, huh?
Yeah, he's down the street in Palo Alto. Yep.
You guys
I
get
guess.
together and barbecue and stuff like that?
Oh yeah. Every other day, I like to do that.
Good. So, Steve, how did Prospect Now start? How did it come into being?
Yeah. Well, I was, as you mentioned, I was a. Actually, I'll go back one click prior. I did enterprise software for a while, and I was actually, ironically, I was selling databases into the enterprise. So our customers were big Fortune 500 companies like Caterpillar and some of these really large shops, and I kind of realized the power of selling data, as a product. Once you build out the data set, right, it's a huge barrier to entry in the beginning because you got to create this data set. But once you create the processes and the systems, I saw that it was a pretty good business, right? So I just kind of filed that away, Derek, and then a couple years later, I actually got out of enterprise software and then got into the real estate business, and so I joined M&M at the time, which was a great firm for investment sales. And so, necessity is the mother of invention, right? The key in that business for me, and I quickly realized it, Derek, and I'm sure you have a lot of experience with this as well, is that, I needed to go talk to building owners, right? Those were the guys that were my customers, and what I found is, unlike residential real estate where, whoever signed the deed is the owner, right? And it's pretty easy. It's owner occupied. There's no mystery as to who's actually controlling the asset. In commercial and investment real estate, it's complicated, right? You've got trusts and LLCs and all this stuff. So I spent a good, 6 to 9 months of my initial career in brokerage putting together this data set for myself, right? And that just really made an impact on me because I saw the duplicative nature of this, because I looked around and I saw, well, everybody's doing the same thing, right? We're, kludging these data sets together, and so it seemed to me like, well, if there was a way for me to build out a data set that made it easier for real estate brokers to contact building owners, and not just any building owner, but building owners that want to sell. That's the ideal, right?
Mm-hmm.
Then I could make a business out of it. So that's what happened. It was that pain point, right? That pain point, and it was an acute pain point for me, and so it motivated me to go start this company.
Well, yeah, when you say kludge together these data sets, I remember in the old days, calling my title rep and getting a list of all the multifamily or residential income owners in, let's say, Venice or Santa Monica, California.
Mm-hmm.
And I wanted phone numbers if possible. So I would get a list of, 2,000 property owners, and maybe 10% of them had phone numbers on it. And then I would look through them, and I'd start going and dialing 411 and trying to get their phone numbers,
right,
to call these people. And the other thing that I did a lot was look for people who have properties for rent, and then write down the phone number and just use that as a prospect. But that's very time consuming and it's very
Yeah.
tedious.
And you know what's interesting about it is, to your credit, you went through the effort to go to do that, right? In some cases, what I found is it's so much work that it doesn't get done at all, right? And as a result of that, you're really limited to the marketing tools. I'm just a big believer in talking to people and sitting down with them and interacting. I mean, when somebody's considering selling a multi-million-dollar asset, and in that mid-market, it might be a substantial portion of their net worth. They're not going to make that decision because you have, a nice Facebook profile. They really want to know that you can deliver, and you need to build that trust. And I felt that, in this case, the technology was a means to get me closer to the customer, right? So yeah, I mean, I found a lot of guys that weren't doing it at all. Because it was so difficult. So
So before we go any further, let's kind of define what Prospect Now, prospectnow.com is, and essentially from a user, it's just a web-based application that has all the property owners pretty much in the country compiled, the properties and the owners and also tenants, where you can go in and segment a market and start prospecting to that market. So, for example, I work Venice and Santa Monica a lot, and I go in there and look for non-owner occupied owners of multifamily property in Venice, for example, and it's kind of like a title, like looking at title information, all the data from the buildings there, and also all the data from the owners there, whether it's an LLC or an individual, when they bought the property, lot size, all the details. And I'd say about 60% of the time, the phone number is right there for you, so you don't even have to look for the phone number.
Exactly. Yeah. So right. I mean, it's interesting because you've been using this, right, for for a while, and I'm sure yeah, it's that same pain point, right? I mean, if I can get direct to, in a perfect world, we want to get to the key decision maker of somebody that is more likely to want to sell than the average, right? That's really what it is. And you think about the opportunity there. One thing that I think is really motivating is when you look at, there's so many buildings out there, and the ones that are hard to find, the owners that are hard to find, those are the guys that aren't getting the marketing, right? And they're not getting the phone calls. In fact, this is kind of an interesting story, but I've done some real estate investment as well, and I had a Starbucks property in San Jose that I had with a couple of partners, and when it came time to sell that property, we had it in an LLC with, a PO box was where the LLC went, and I never got a phone call on that property. At the time, I actually let my real estate agent a license expire, right? Because I knew I was going to do Prospect Now. I didn't want to have any kind of conflict or anything. So I wanted to go hire a broker, and it was ironic because I never got a phone call on that property because I guess I was pretty hard to find, right? I had the PO box and the LLC and all that. But if Prospect Now had existed then, somebody could have found out, oh yeah, Steve Wayne's the managing partner of that LLC. Here's his phone number, what have you. So I always thought that was kind of ironic.
What, Steve? Why don't we pull up the website? I'll share my screen. We can take a look at it real quick here.
Sure.
I think people definitely want to see it. Okay, so here we are on the screen. I'll go ahead and sign in. I should have probably signed in before, but that's okay. Okay, it's not coming up.
Oh, I think you're registering, actually. You already have an account, right? Yeah, so if you scroll up. I actually have a tab open right here if you want. If you click, yeah, there you go. Now you're in business.
Okay, so I'm just for the benefit of the audience watching, you can do a property search, and let's go to advanced search here. So, obviously I'm looking in California, Venice, Santa Monica, Inglewood. You put in all the parameters here. I usually, cut off the property ownership at about 5 years. I don't want really to prospect anybody that's, bought the property in the last 3 years.
Yeah, that makes sense. That's good.
Um,
And I can see, so it looks like you're doing a zip code there, and then you were doing some parameters on the building size as well.
yeah,
Yeah.
actually anything from 2 units on up.
Okay.
And,
Yeah, that's great.
save my searches. So these are all my saved searches right here. So,
Right.
for example, in Santa Monica.
And so all the yellow ones are the guys you've called, right?
Yeah.
So,
Well, what I
or
do
you.
I do a couple of things. One of the things that I do is I don't know if anybody else does this, but I like to go on my off time when I'm not calling. I
Uh-huh.
like to go look and find out people that have phone numbers that are actually callable, and I put them into a separate database called callback. And
Oh,
I know
nice. Okay.
I can just grind through that callback database, and I know the numbers are already there. I don't waste any time actually looking at phone numbers when I'm calling, because that's what slows me down is having to look at phone numbers.
Yeah, that's the thing we want to avoid, right? Yeah, I don't, there's a a newer feature on there too where you can select all the records and then you can say um, get phones and it will grind through all the phone numbers. I don't know if you've used that one where it'll do it for you in real time. And so if you select like 50 records, it'll go and we're in each moment we're looking for the best quality phone number we can get, right? And then
Uh-huh.
to your point, you use the 60% number. I think that's about accurate. So if you got 50 properties, then you'll have 30 with phone numbers. Boom, you can go hit those up. So yeah, I think it's really interesting actually. I always learn a lot, Derrick, too, to talk to customers and see how they're using it.
Right.
Because you know what? It's been a while since I've done brokerage, right? And so especially market conditions, like drive a lot of this.
Mhm.
So I love doing this kind of stuff and talking to guys like you to kind of see how it's being used and then I can kind of compile best practices, right?
Yeah, that's what I
And
think you
share
need to
that.
do is compile best practices from all your brokers. Let me ask
Yeah,
you another question too.
yeah.
You have thousands of users on Prospect now. What have you noticed about the characteristics of the most successful brokers?
Oh, that's a great question. Yeah, so I think the first thing is desire, right? And I don't know how you give that to yourself. It's almost a gift, right? You gotta want to do something. And so I've seen folks. I mean, I can say that we are privileged to have what I think are some of the top producers in the business using the tool because they're hard chargers. They tend to be hard chargers that want to get after it. They're doing a lot of marketing, right? So because of that, we get to see a lot of those folks. I actually did an interview on our YouTube channel of a guy named Ken Hoff who closed a $278 million apartment portfolio deal, and he talks about how he did that. And he talks about a lot of his stuff. What I've noticed is everybody might have different, uh, tactically pieces the way they run their business. But what I've noticed consistently is first, they're all kind of systems based, so that they have. I like to break it up like this. There's people, process, and technology. So all three of these legs of the stool have to work, right? You can't just have technology without people that know how to operate it. Which is, clearly one of the reasons why I think your book that you're writing here makes so much sense, right? Because people, they know they need to have technology, but it's not enough just to have it, right? You've got to have a process, and then you got to have the right people. And so I think a systems-based approach is something I've seen consistently. They've got a system and a plan, and they work it. And Prospect Now is a part of that plan, but it's not the only part, right? It's their mindset. You talked about, what were we talking about before we got on the call? A lot of it is meant mind-based,
Well,
right?
yeah, the most important part of the book I'm writing is your mindset and your attitude. Um,
Exactly. Yeah.
if you have all the tools and stuff, but you're always operating from fear, instead of a powerful mindset, then you're going to be at a big disadvantage, even if you have all the tools.
I totally agree. So if I was to break it down, I would say desire, a systems approach, and then the last thing I would say is what I've seen pretty consistently is ability to set and achieve goals. So, if you want to get somewhere, right? If I want to go to Lake Tahoe for the weekend and I just get in my car and I start driving, right? The odds that I'm going to get there are pretty low. But if
Right.
I've got a roadmap to get there, so it's now, one thing I will tell you that is not uniform across all the different folks that I've seen be successful with our product is their personality type. Some people are introverted and they're very quiet, and other people are really outgoing. I haven't seen any kind of, again, this is my observation, right? So this isn't entirely scientific, but I have not seen, that any kind of natural personality type works better than another. It seems to be more kind of how that person executes.
Hmm. What technology strategies are you seeing successful brokers employing these days?
Well, we're in an awesome time period right now for this industry because there's so many different, different tools that are coming on from startups and what have you. But I think the first thing I'm seeing is, your book's called Cloud Agent, right? There's no reason, in my opinion, to have to be using desktop-based stuff anymore. We were talking about Google Apps or Google for Work. My company runs entirely on that, right? So
You're
everybody has
entirely cloud-based?
entirely, right? We have Google Apps we use so many different cloud services. In fact, it's really interesting. When I look at at the end of the month, I can see like all these little $59, $99 charges here and there for all these different services. But I think that the speed that you can get online and get moving, a prospect now is a great example of that, right? If somebody wants to get access, they get a username and password and they go on a webinar training session and they're in business, right? So I think everything I'm seeing is a direction towards that cloud. And the other thing I'm starting to see more of, which I feel is maybe been operating on the residential side a little bit more, is the more managed approach to brokerage. So using a CRM, but not just for yourself. If you're a broker, using it to actually look at what the productivity is of your team, right? So obviously there are tools out there like Rethink, Apto, REA, these different tools for managing the data. And I'm seeing that, especially the ones like Rethink in particular is one that I think is a pretty good tool
What is
for
that?
managing the data. It's a Salesforce-based CRM system for commercial brokers.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so the Salesforce, so they built this amazing platform, right? And now what's genius about it is they don't have to be the expert in real estate, so they can leave that up to various entrepreneurs who know how to leverage that platform and build out something for them. But at any rate, the point is, I'm seeing a lot of adoption of the cloud, and I'm also seeing just a lot more discipline around using the tools.
Yeah, well, that's great. Now, originally, your Prospect Now app was marketed towards commercial brokers. Is that correct?
Correct. Yep.
But now you've added single-family homes. Is that correct?
Yeah, we have. Yeah, and I would define our market, Derrick, as we're the customer that benefits the most from our tool is really more on what I would consider on the business side of real estate. So that means the reason we expanded the single-family homes is because there's as I recall, there's 19.6 million. Okay, we have 100 million plus properties. Okay, when you include the single family, it's about 10 million commercial. But of the single families, 19 million of them are non-owner occupied. Right? So the point is there's this huge market out there of it's still investment real estate, but they're the single family homes and condos that are rentals, right? So so yeah, we expanded to all of it so that we could serve those investors. For example, there are guys that own 10 single family homes, but you might never find them if you were looking for just for people that own 5-unit buildings. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So I think that market is a good market, and we've seen a lot of growth there.
Well, let me
From
tell
our
you,
customer base. Yeah.
whenever I talk to a residential agent who is struggling or is looking how to improve their business, I point them to Prospect Now. And in fact, I've had a couple of my colleagues actually join Prospect Now, and I tell them just go into your zip code areas or your farm or whatever whatever they're working, and just look up, search non-owner occupied single family homes.
Right.
And then the best ones to call are the ones that are out of state or have owned the property for a long time, or that own multiple properties, and just call those people. Even though they're not investment brokers, they're residential brokers. I mean,
but here's the interesting thing about that, Derrick, is that this was a big eye opener to me when I was in brokerage, is that you can pick up the phone and call an owner of an investment property and ask them, hey, I was just calling about your property. I represent a lot of buyers and sellers. Do you have any plans to sell it or what have you? And that actually, one out of 15 maybe be considering selling. That's actually a decent ratio. So when you take the single family home component that you're talking about, the thing is, if you're talking about somebody's investment property, they don't find it, in my experience, they don't find it offensive that you're calling them about an investment property asset, because you've got information that they need, right? Now, it's a little bit different on a single-family owner-occupied house, although I know people, use the phones really successfully there as well. But the thing about the business side of it that I like, it's almost a B2B thing, is that you can pick up the phone and talk to somebody about their investment property, and if you've got valuable data on market condition, they're going to talk to you, and it works. So yeah, I think that's great advice for those residential agents.
Let me ask you another question too. What are your favorite scripts? More for like a multifamily or commercial or whatever.
Yeah.
Not so much.
Yes. So there's one that I love. I employed this when I was in the business, and I have to give credit to my old regional manager at M&M, but he had a really good script that he used, and it's sometimes less is more, right? And we called this the truth close, and it was real simple. Instead of trying to finagle your way into a meeting or it's the opposite. It's total transparency, right? So what I would say, and I got so many meetings doing this, was that, hey, I get somebody on the phone. I say, hey, Derrick, I'm calling about your property, and you're going to say to me, I have no interest in selling, Steve. Look, I'm not. That property's been in my family for 15 years. I'm never selling it. And what I would say is, look, I get it. I hear you loud and clear that you're not going to sell. But you know what? I'm really aggressive in this business. I know what's going on, and I'm a hardworking guy. And maybe one day down the road, who knows? Maybe 20 years from now, you're going to want to sell. And when that day comes, I'd love the opportunity to earn the business. And I know you're not going to do business with somebody that you don't have a relationship with. So, at a minimum, I would love to just come by, understanding that you're not selling now, and just drop off a business card, shake your hand, maybe show you some stuff that's on the market. Is that reasonable? And most people say, all right, I got 5. It's hard to say no to that, and I, okay, all right, and they know it's true also that it's good to have a few solid brokers that are turning up inventory in your back pocket, right? So, because if I'm, the other thing is, actually, I tell agents to do this too, is if you have Prospect Now, you can actually use Prospect Now on the listing appointment and say, look, Mr. Customer, let me show you something. Okay, you're going to hire XYZ agent, right? But if you hire me, let me show you the tools that I employ and what I'm going to do for you. So a lot of people are just going to throw a sign up on your property and wait for the phone to ring, right? That's not me. That's not how I operate. I'm going to actually, let me show you. You pull up the screen, right, and say, look at what you just did, right? Look at all these properties. They got their phone numbers, like properties to yours. I'm going to pick up the phone and call these guys. I'm going to tell them about your listing. And you can show them that, and that works actually too. That's another
Wow,
good
that's a great, yeah,
approach.
that's a great tool because I often tell the prospects, listen, the buyer for your property is probably, owns a property within 2 or 3 miles of
Exactly.
radius of your property, so it's not going to be that difficult for me to find the right person for it.
Yeah. Hey, Derrick, I don't know if you've noticed, we added a new feature relatively recently called the guided search. Have you used that at all on Prospect
No.
Now? So if you go in there, you'll see there's a guided search, and what we do now is we actually make suggestions. We suggest to the user filters that are more likely to produce probable sellers. It's the stuff you already know. You already talked about it, right? Multiple assets, all this. But for the new user, it kind of gives them ways to go in and do that. So you could show that to your customer and say, look, I'm going to call every owner that owns more than 2 fourplexes, right? Or I'm going to call every owner that if you're talking commercial property, maybe it's got a loan coming due in, typically it's a 5-year balloon payment on the financing, right? So you could say, I'm going to call every commercial building owner that has a loan that was originated 4 years ago. But in Prospect Now, we'll guide them through that, so they don't have to know how all the speeds and the feeds. Just click a button and it shows up for them. So that's something we've added that we've gotten a lot of positive feedback on.
So yeah, we've started to discuss this before the interview started. What, in your opinion, is like the low-hanging fruit if you're just new to Prospect Now, let's say, and you want to go after certain multifamily, let's say, apartment owners? What would be the
Yeah.
low-hanging fruit as far as prospects go?
Yeah. So if you go to our blog, the prospectnow.com/blog, I believe is the link. I did a survey on this. I thought it was we actually sent out a survey to 40 or 50,000 of our members, right, who have at one time or another used the product or registered for the product or whatever, and asked them why did their last seller sell. And so it was a survey, right? And then so we compiled the results, and it was really interesting. The results are on that blog, but if you look at it, you can see that some of the reasons you can track, and some of them you can't. So, for example, tired of managing the property. That was one. Okay, so now what are the filters associated with managing a property? That's one of the reasons why I like the out-of-state owners, is because if they're out of state and there's distance between them and the property, they maybe just be like, my property manager's not cutting it. This is just becoming a headache, right? So out-of-state owners is one. I like the multi-asset owners because that's just probabilities, right? I learned the hard way on this. If you take a property, let's say you call somebody up and they're like, hey, I'm not selling that property. Well, that indicates that they have others, right? So if I've got 10 properties, maybe I'm not selling the one that particularly you called on, but I'm selling another one. So I like the probabilities associated with multiple multi-asset owners, and they don't have to be big properties, right? I mean, they can be in the middle market, they could even be single family homes. I like the loan origination date one for commercial buildings. Single tenant net lease properties. Prospect Now is good for filtering those. Those are nice because they're not location dependent. They're kind of treated as a bond almost. So those, to me, that's the low-hanging fruit. There's a few others I think I'm not thinking of, but they're on the guided search shortcuts.
How long they've owned the property?
Yeah, how long they've owned it, when it was built. That's another one. Deferred maintenance. Yeah, I definitely like. I mean, obviously the depreciation schedules are different on commercial versus residential, but you could look for properties where the owner has no more depreciation, right? That's another one. So I think it's 27 and a half years for residential and 39. Is it still 39, Derrick?
I think it's 27 and a half for like multifamily, residential
yeah.
properties. Commercial, I can't remember. I don't
Yeah,
really
I
do
think
commercial that often.
yeah, I think it's a little bit more on commercial, but yeah. So how long they've owned it? There's those to me that's the low-hanging fruit.
Right, right. One of the and we talked about this briefly too. One of the really important skills, if you're going to be seriously prospecting and using Prospect Now, is only about 60% of the phone numbers come up. So you've got to chase down the other 40%. So I'm really good at that. I use white pages, Google, 10 digits .us, people.com, that's PIPL.com, and I say I can about half to 60% of the people I'm searching for I end up finding. So there's a
Yeah,
lot of times I
the
can't.
internet is a useful tool, right? It's
Yeah, so you have
amazing.
to have that. You really have to know how to find numbers that aren't in Prospect Now, and that's really boosted my success ratio because they're not getting calls.
Yeah,
People can't find their numbers, so it's just something that a skill set that you have to have in order to get more people to dial.
definitely.
Is that something that you address with your clientele, or is that a discussion item ever?
Yeah, so there's a button on there. Let's say you got 60% out of the gate, right? If you look when you don't get a phone number on Prospect Now, there's a button that says search manually. I don't know if you've used that very much. Have you ever used that?
I do, but I haven't had as much success as I have just looking up on white pages or
Yeah.
people or something like that.
Because that capability, like a lot of the data that's you know, technically speaking, the data sets that we have, you should never need to go outside of the tool. But sometimes it's like for whatever reason the data sets don't sync up exactly or what have you. But we do have a backup mechanism in there called this find manually. Quite well if you really need that one phone number, right? And you can go in and widen up the search. For example, like instead of Derrick Ruiz in a given like city, you might say D, just the first initial Ruiz in the zip code, right? Things like that, and that's what we allow you to kind of tweak on that. And that's you can get there. You can definitely elevate it. Now, I will say that some of them are just numbers that are really tough to find. Period, right? But one thing I do tell people also is that because the tool is all about speed, right? It's all
Hmm.
about efficiency. So let's say you've got 1,000 properties and we've got phone numbers for 600 of them. First things first, right? Call the 600, right?
Sure.
Call the 600, and then in your case, you're a power user, right? So it makes total sense to go out and get that other, spend the time and go get the other, 400 or however many you can get.
Well,
But
if I look at a record, I can't find the phone number, and it's an out-of-state seller, and they've owned it for 30 years.
yeah, you're going to take the time.
Yeah, I'm going to
Yeah,
take the time.
yeah,
One
yeah.
thing. One thing I wanted to add too for our audience too that may want to use Prospect Now and they want to cold call people and stuff is I always send a handwritten thank you card after I speak to the person, whether or not they're interested in selling or not. And I always leave phone messages for them too. And I follow up with a thank you card after the phone message as well. And if it's somebody I left a message for, I'll just say, hi, my name is Derrick. I'm a broker out here. And I left a message for you about your 123 Main Street yesterday.
Yeah.
I recently sold this property around the block from you, and my investor buyer is looking for more properties in the zip code that your property's in. Do you have any interest selling? Please contact me. And then I'll fold up my little MLS sheet or whatever, and I'll put it, just sold, and I'll slip it into the thing there, put a card in there, and I'll mail it out to them. And you wouldn't believe how many people get back to me from a phone message and a thank you card. It's amazing. In fact, I have a listing right now in Venice for 2.3 million. And she got my card, she got my phone message, and she called me. And it's just amazing. So that's just something that I always do. It's tedious writing out thank you cards, but I tell you what, man, it's paid off big time for me.
Yeah, that's awesome. That makes that. What I've noticed too is that there's no one trick pony, right? And what you're kind of
Exactly.
illustrating here is that it's amazing how you do the first one. So in this case, it's the phone. Let's say you call them, you don't get them live. Then the next one is the voicemail. Then the next one is the thank you card. Finally, they're like, oh, man, this guy is serious, right? And it really does work. Yeah.
Yeah, I wanted to share too. I'll share my screen here. I wanted to share the best listing I've got so far from Prospect Now, and it was this listing right here. I don't know if you can see it. It's at 3214 Highland Avenue in Santa Monica, and
Nice.
it's 8 units. And I sold it for 2.75. And it was just a cold call. I cold called the guy, and he's like, "Wow, as a matter of fact, I'm thinking about selling this property. I think it's entitled with a tentative track map." So I immediately rushed down to the city of Santa Monica, pulled the file. It was entitled, so it was ready for a developer. So the developers are hungry for property, and I double pop this thing. So I mean, do the math: 5% at 2.75. Yeah, I think I paid for Prospect Now with this one sale for the next 500 years.
That's great. I love that. That's our whole, if you think about it, that's basically why what you just showed is why I started this company, is because I love the idea, and I love to be able to, help guys like you, put you in a position. I'm doing a little piece of that, right? Obviously, you gotta be good at what you're doing and go down and give the pitch and all that, but that I love that kind of stuff. That's great.
Yeah, yeah, and one thing too, for the audience that's watching this too, when you start consistently prospecting, it's like you're putting out vibrations of the universe that, hey, I'm here, I'm working, and I'm going to make it happen. And it's so weird. I'll be prospecting consistently, and all of a sudden, phone calls start coming in from past clients and prospects in my database. Hey, Derrick, I'm thinking of selling right now. Why don't we get together and have coffee and let's talk? Out of the blue, it happens, and I swear it's because you're putting out the right vibrations of the universe. Hey, I'm serious. I'm calling people.
Yeah.
I'm here to help.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, the universe says, "Well, okay, let's throw you this deal right here." It's just weird how that happens.
Yeah, and you know what else it is? It's also about being able to work without the need for the immediate payback, right?
Mm-hmm.
That you talk about, like, lessons of the universe, right? Is that ability to push through when you're not, like, when you get a listing like that signed up and then ultimately closed. That's a good feeling, right?
Mm-hmm.
But you think about all the things you had to do, right, to get that. And there was nobody saying, "Yeah, good job, Derrick." You know what I'm saying? There's no feedback loop there, and that's actually, I almost think of that sometimes as like a mental muscle that you build, is the ability to just kind of persist, and then when you do that, like, it's coming back, and it's really rewarding.
Yeah. Well, before we wrap up, I've got a couple more things. We talked about this earlier. Oh, I know what I wanted to ask you. I'm a big reader. I probably read 1 or 2 books a week on my iPhone or my iPad. What books do you recommend? Because I always like to ask the people that I interview, what books influence them, or what do they recommend, or what are they reading, or what's made a big impact on their lives?
Yeah. So I think one of my favorite books is The Fountainhead by Ayn Rand, and that book just, it's not necessarily written purely from a business perspective, but for whatever reason, that book motivated me from a business perspective. I like the idea of one of the themes in that book that I think is loving your work, right? And this love for it creates results, but you're not necessarily doing it because of the results. You're doing it for this love that you have of it, and I think I also like Atlas Shrugged as well, but that book had a substantial impact on me. I also recently read Unbroken. Have you read that?
Oh yeah, I read that.
God, that is such a great book.
You want to talk about persistence?
Yeah.
And not giving up.
Yeah, unbelievable. Yeah. I mean, bottom line is, none of us ever have a right to complain after having read that book, right?
Never.
It's like unbelievable.
Yeah. Well, listen, Steve, I really appreciate and thank you for allowing us to interview you today. I think that brokers that are watching this need to go out and get a subscription to Prospect Now. I mean, it's unbelievably cheap. It's less than $100 a month. Probably the best money I've ever spent. Like I said, that one sale I made on Highland Avenue, that commission was like over 100 G. So it's paid for my Prospect Now for the next 500 years or so. I mean, it's amazing. So go out to prospectnow.com. And can anybody want to contact you? What's the best way to get a hold of you?
Sure. So I can be reached at swayne@prospectnow.com. And if you are interested in the product, the best way to do that is probably to go to our website, and you can click contact sales on there, and you can register for a free trial also. There's a 3-day free trial on there. You can go do that, and you'll have like one of our sales folks will reach out to you and walk you through it. We've got all kinds of training. Training sessions on the website, webinars. We're big on training, right? And as you know, Derrick, right? The technology is one piece of it, right? So that's why we're really big on the training, and so we want to help people succeed with it.
Great, awesome. Well, again, thank you to Steve Wayne from ProspectNow.com. It's been a pleasure. I use the product every day. I love it. It makes prospecting so much easier. Just get a good script and just use it. And it's just amazing what what kind of leads you can generate by just picking up the phone, and that's what we need to do, especially if you're an investment broker or a commercial broker, because I never do open houses or caravan and all that other crap. I don't like that stuff at all. I like just doing investment properties, and I think cold calling investment property owners is one of the best ways. In fact, I talk to a lot of brokers, and it seems like direct mail is getting less and less effective because so many people do it. I talk to property owners all the time, and they're like, "Oh, I get like 10." They own multiple properties. I get 10 postcards every week, and that's just like,
Yeah.
oh. But
Yeah.
how many people pick up the phone and call? Not that many. So
That's true.
it's very,
Yeah.
very effective. And again, I want to thank you. And if anybody wants to get a hold of Steve, it's swayne@prospectnow.com, or to sign up or get a free trial, go to prospectnow.com. And Steve, thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thanks a lot, Derrick. I really appreciate being on today.
All right, take care. Bye, everybody. This is Derrick Ruiz, your apartment broker and expert and author of Cloud Agent. I look forward to seeing you soon on the next interview. Take care.